Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. I would like to welcome you all to today's panel discussion on AI and the future of work, positive impact, and overcoming its adoption challenges. On behalf of Agile People Ops, me, Mariana Di Rosario, your host, would like to thank you all for taking out your precious time and joining us for our second panel event of the year 2023. We have an amazing panel of experts with us today who will be sharing their insights and perspectives on the topic. And with no further delay, let me introduce you to our panelists. So the first panelist is Ross Stevenson. He's the founder and chief learning strategist at Steal Your Thoughts, dedicated to transforming learning and development for the modern world. The second panelist is Kevin Ulster. He heads up the learning team at Synthesia. He is focused on building Synthesia's customer academy and helping people figure out what to do with generative AI videos. I would also like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Mr. Muteb Al-Shamri. He is our Saudi Arabia country ambassador, and he is well versed in business coaching and mentoring, agile organizational culture and climate, employee engagement, and experience. So a very warm welcome to all the panelists, the moderator, and whoever has joined us as the audience today. Over to you, Muteb, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Mariana. Hello, everyone. It's great being here and to see our audience. I can see that we're having a diversity that from so many countries are joining. That's great to have you here. And first of all, we are having a poll question. I wanted to check how our audience are engaged with the topic and with the AI tools as an idea to be used at work. So let's start the poll question, which is, how excited are you to use generative AI tools at work? And we are having four options. Option one, very excited. Option two, excited. Option three, need more information. And option four, neutral. You can go ahead and choose your option, and we'll see the poll, how our audience are engaged with the subject. Interesting. I can see the very excited option is going higher. So as we can see here, very excited, 49% of our audience, excited 32, and need more information 19%, and that's great. So by today, hopefully we will be covering most of the question marks. It may comes to professionals who may concern or question the AI tools at work. Today, hopefully, we will be tackling most of the points, and at the same time, once we finish our discussion with the folks in here, Ross and Kevin, we will be having a Q&A session where also you can ask whichever points which we didn't cover during our discussion. Mariana, done with the pool, right?
Yes, the poll is done.
All right, great. So we're going with the question one. I'm gonna direct this question to Ross from the L&D point of view. So, can you share examples of generative AI tools and the benefits it has brought to an organization or industry?
Yeah, definitely. So, first of all, hello everyone. So, in answer to that question, I suppose it's one thing I would say is we're still kind of in the infancy of that cycle at the moment in time, particularly with if we look at generative AI tools as probably most popular is ChatGPT, which I'm sure you've all heard of in some capacity, and other tools from Meta, such as Llama and Anthropic as well, who have similar generative AI tools is they've not all been able to penetrate enterprise organizations yet. And that's for a number of reasons, as we know, because there's not enterprise level editions available for all of these or integrated yet. Of course, ChatGPT for Enterprise has been released in the last month. So ready for business use. You've got Microsoft Copilot and you've got Google coming as well. So I think in terms of specific case studies on generative AI, I think we've got a little bit of time yet to see how that embeds into the enterprise level and the benefits for that. I think AI as an umbrella, because of course, generative AI is one part of artificial intelligence, that there's a number of case studies where companies like IKEA have been able to go through a whole reskilling process. They reskilled around 8,500 employees from customer service advisors to interior design advisors. And a lot of that was built in using automated artificial intelligence tools to help them with that. I won't go through that whole case study because it's quite long. And there are other examples of that as well. Zapier, which some of you may know, they actually in their L&D team managed to save hundreds of hours using different types of automation so they could work at speed and also have high quality work too. But from a generative AI perspective, what we're seeing is the introduction of these tools. So as an example, Walmart last week, the big American retailer, announced that they're going to give a generative AI tool. They haven't announced which one it will be to 50,000 of their office workers. So that's going to be really interesting to see how do they embed that? How will they train that large language model on the personal data and company data that they've got? And what is the success for that? So I think the benefits are definitely going to come. I think, look, the elephant in the room is there's been a lot of disruption already. There's been a lot, I'd say, more negative press on job displacement, on changing industries such as marketing's talking about quite a lot, being a wordsmith. How does that change in the age of AI? So I think if you imagine it on this cycle right now, we've probably been in this bit where there's been quite a bit of hype and quite a bit of doomsday in, and we're kind of moving into this notion now where as big organizations start to adopt this as an enterprise tool, we'll now start to see how does this apply from a productivity standpoint. So probably in 6 to 12 months time, we'll talk about this like we would with a Miro or a Zoom or a Slack, where how are we using that to leverage? So from a Gen AI perspective, I can't give you pinpoint ones, but they'll appear over time for sure, and we'll start to see a more, should I say, balanced view of the benefits and also concerns for organizations. But I'm sure Kevin has a lot to add to that as well from his point of view.
All right, thank you, Ross. And Kevin, your point of view.
Sure thing. Hello to everyone out there. Glad you're spending your time with us. It's great to see some folks here. Kind of to add on to what Ross is saying, I one of the frameworks that I use to assess how well are these tools doing. Gartner, big company that does a lot of analysis around HR tools and HR trends. They have the hype cycle, and so the way that they've categorized this is exactly what Ross has said. It's in its infancy, but we're in this stage of I think the stage of the hype cycle we're in is called inflated expectations, where when ChatGPT dropped, everybody thought that all of our work is going to change tomorrow. But then as it became apparent there wasn't a safe way to hook this up to the data that companies use and business data, and way to ensure that that is safe. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later about the challenges of implementing generative AI, but it's that big question right now is how can we use this for business results? And so I think one of the easiest ways to wrap your head around either industries or organizations that have benefited from generative AI tools and in particular large language models like ChatGPT is anything related to dialogue and conversation. So it's kind of been under our noses the whole time, but the primary role of ChatGPT is just that. It's chat, it's dialogue and conversations. And so excuse me. So the areas that have benefited the most are the introduction of large language models into different apps and services, particularly around customer service roles. So AI assistants, once you built that into customer service applications like Intercom, you're able to answer more routine inquiries. So the questions that need to get answered thousands and thousands of times, it frees up the human agents to give more of a personal touch and contribute to more high value work. So an example from here is the approach that JetBlue has taken. So if you're not familiar with it, JetBlue is a US-based airline that's partnered with the tool they use is called ASAP, ASAPP with an extra P. That allows them to kind of add generative AI enabled solutions to automating conversations and helping chat channels, and helping in particular their contact centers provide customer service. So as a result of implementing large language models and generative AI, they're able to save an average of 280 seconds per chat, which is a total of 73,000 hours of agent time saved in a single quarter. That means that agents are able to serve customers with actual complex problems. And you think about a big airline like JetBlue, if you're able to save, 280 seconds per chat, imagine how much more you can service. And then I think that also asks a question. So then what are the humans for if you're using AI for chat? Well, a big part of their call centers is the role of coaches who spend, before AI had spent a lot of time analyzing all these transcripts and conversations with customers. And they manually do that, meaning they read over the transcript and they try to figure out what's the narrative and what's the story. And when they're manually reading these conversations, they got up to reading 3% of all total conversations in order to give coaching and feedback to their customer service agents. Well, with AI tools that are able to, they're now able to analyze 100% of all customer interactions and compare that to internal knowledge base articles or other features that are available with JetBlue to kind of make their processes more efficient or increase the customer satisfaction or decrease their answer time. So the coaches can spend more time working with the humans can spend more time working with the higher value problems. And then of course I can't go without mentioning Synthesia, where we focus more on generative AI video. And so what essentially we do is we take in the past, if you had to make a video, you got to grab your iPhone or your camera, you had to get your script, and you had to sit there and record yourself and edit that. And if you ever, I know that Ross and I do this all the time, where we create videos for ourselves, but where you have to, practice everything and edit it down to perfection. But with generative AI, you can now use AI avatars and you can just use text to speech to then add a human looking person into professional video for a fraction of the price. And the areas that we've seen the most impact for that is the training and learning and development space, where there's a lot of instructional and training content that needs to be made. So for example, McDonald's, they had a 40-page read and remember guide for new hires. So if you're being hired at a McDonald's in Singapore and you're learning how to take in service a customer that comes up to the counter, and they're putting in an order, they had to read a 40-page guide and remember how to service that customer. Well, they were able to take that 40-page customer guide that nobody reads, turn that into video, and then it's an AI video that they can update and have delivered in up to 160 different languages. So, and we could talk a little bit about that later on down the way, but that's kind of where we fit in with generative AI video, is how quickly can you make these things. And if you could automate certain parts of the production process, what does that leave your human self able to do?
Well, I agree with most of the points you mentioned, and most of the organizations who are utilizing the AI and to be more beneficial, who are going agile in their people ops like JetBlue and McDonald's, and there are also so many corporations across the globe. They are moving forward into implementing these type of techniques, which also, yeah, I agree with you about the mentioned point. Ross, question two. What are some of the main concerns or risk associated with the widespread adoption of AI, particularly in relation to job displacement?
Yes, this is an interesting one, right? And I think it's interesting because biologically we're kind of programmed to always scan out for threats, and we're kind of here to survive versus then keep knowledge all the time. And when anything new gets introduced to our society, there is usually that cycle of fear and negativity on, is this going to wipe this out? Is this going to stop us? And a lot of the work that I do with organizations and talks I give at conferences, I always liken this to, you're usually in one of two camps. Either you're sitting there in fear that Terminator 2 Judgment Day scenario is going to come and Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come kick down your door and take you, or you're fully ingrained in the Matrix and you want to be like Neo and you want to know how to do everything. And I find people in one of those two. I think the really interesting thing is that on the reality of it, jobs will change. But I think at the moment we do focus too much on the eradication of jobs versus what I think we should look at is what are the tasks that are going to change and how do the tasks that we work on affect those jobs. So I'll give you some examples of this. I'll give you a framework actually that I'm using with a lot of organizations now, which is basically this task, what I call kind of an AI task assessment framework. So what I do is I'll sit there and work with, in this example, a L&D team. And what I'll say to them is, if we're going to map out all the jobs in the organization, what we want to do is understand what are the 5 to 10 high priority tasks that each person in that role does. Then once we've got those tasks, we'll basically just create a very simple 3-column table. One column that says tasks that we can automate with AI, which basically means we can just hand it over to, we don't have to do anything for that. It can save you hours of work and frustration. And I'll give a particular example of that in the moment for my L&D world. And then we look at our middle column is tasks that we can augment with AI. So augmentation is all around working in collaboration with AI. So an example of that may be you might work with ChatGPT to be reviewing a piece of content or creating a piece of content. You might be working with Kevin and the team at Synthesia on a text-to-speech video. That's very much a collaborative effort with a generative AI tool. And then the final part of that column is what is the unique human tasks? So what are the things that we're not going to replace right now with AI, and how can we start to maximize those in those jobs and an organization? So if I give you a working example of that from an L&D perspective, it might be we have a L&D professional and part of that role is actually analyzing data. Now, if we take that example, in terms of automation, what we can do is say, okay, we can use an AI tool to actually automate the generation and synthesization of data from all of our learning tools and put that into a dashboard for us or put it into a downloadable file that we can then interrogate. So the hope is that probably wipes off about 30 to 40% of what you may need to do in that data-oriented task. Then in terms of the collaboration or augmentation of that, what you would do is the human is then work with a large language model, such as a ChatGPT, to then interrogate that data to unearth insights using that tool. And then you can unearth your own insights. And as Kevin says, you have a conversation with those tools. This isn't about trying to find a master prompt or the secret prompt that's going to unlock everything, because it's just not going to happen. It's about working with the tool to interrogate the data you've got in terms of the context that you're working in and the specific output you want. And then the last element of that process, so the tasks for humans in that would be you then presenting that to a senior leadership team, because artificial intelligence is not going to do that for you. So you've automated the collection and synthesization of that data. You've then interrogated it with AI, and then you as the human do the most human bit, which is communicating those results and the benefits and looking at what you can do with that data with your senior leadership team. So my point here is that I think at the moment we're too focused on AI killing jobs or taking jobs, but I think really we should look at it as task elimination, task enhancement, and then focusing specifically on the tasks that we can do. And there's loads of data on this already that you can find online. Microsoft have released a report in their Work Trends Index where they're talking about the AI skills brain, which is about the same thing again. Working with AI, how do we do that? The skills that are outside of that are more analytical thinking, creative decisions, being more strategic. So it's focusing on maximizing that. And again, the LinkedIn CEO, Ryan Roslansky, wrote something very similar about this, where he really believed from all the data that they're seeing at LinkedIn, that we're now moving to this kind of task and skills ecosystem. So really investing in human skills, looking at AI, where does it help or where does it hinder our tasks, and then bringing those together. And I think what we'll see is just a natural evolution of jobs. So it's not saying, those jobs will disappear. Like for example, when Kevin mentioned around customer service, I mentioned around the same thing with the IKEA case study. It's not to say those jobs will disappear. They will just evolve, and there will be some probably augmentation with AI in that way. So I think that's my thoughts on it. I think we know the main concerns and risks. We talk about data, we talk about proper training. I think those are well known. Enterprise level tools, which are now coming in, are probably going to allay some of those fears, because it will be data that's locked down to the organization and you're working with the organization's data. But of course, my main message here would be all of this only works if you are able to understand how to effectively wield these tools in the world that you work in, and that companies are able to effectively upskill their workforce to make the most of them. So I'll leave it with that, and I'll let Kevin chime in with his thoughts there.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. I totally agree with you, actually. Before we go to Kevin, when we be a senior or having a leadership role into any type of organization, part of the organizational change that it comes with the resistance. Some people, they may resist without understanding. Some people may resist, they're having their own reasons. However, I would agree with you that we have to, people need to deep understand how to utilize the AI tools in order to make their job easier than having the fear of losing their jobs.
Yeah, I'll give you a very quick anecdote on that. Is if we go back through history and we look at, there were many times where people said the internet would destroy us, there'll be massive job loss, and a part of that did happen, but it was job changes, it was cultural changes, it was industry changes. At one point not too long ago, there were university professors rioting because of the calculator, saying that because of the introduction of the calculator, the world economic system was going to fall apart, that we would no longer be doing maths, and we'd all be in a terrible, terrible state. So I think if we look at those cases in history and we kind of apply some of that context to now, we can look at, as a society, we are probably inclined to a lot of panic and a lot of hype. And then we move into that phase of, okay, to your point, now we're educated on this and we understand it a bit more. We can now put it in there. So yeah, I'm going to be one of those people who's like, look, don't be sitting there at night worrying about your job falling apart, because we just don't know yet.
Sorry, Motab.
Totally agree with you. Let's go to Kevin.
Well, I was just going to add to that. Something that always makes me smile is it's still very much under debate whether or not programs like ChatGPT can actually understand what you're actually saying or what you're asking, or is it comprehending the thing that you're asking? And I think about every time. If you think about every time you're having a dialogue with ChatGPT, how many times have you actually said thank you for your answer, or that's very nice. You don't need to say that to a piece of technology, but us as humans, we have a natural tendency to anthropomorphize or put human like characteristics on top of technology. And so, even with ChatGPT and large language models, it's just giving its best guess about what word makes the most logical sense that comes next. It's not actually cognitively processing the same way that humans do. But yeah, it's just a funny thing to think about how many times you've actually thanked ChatGPT for what it's done.
Once you thank the ChatGPT, what its reply to you?
Oh, it knows that when a person has input a thank you, it says you're welcome, because that's what it's been trained up on these on how human beings have conversation. I just wanted to take this opportunity to actually just build off of what Ross had said earlier about folks losing their jobs. I really echo what he's saying about it's an opportunity to move away from how we think about roles and who has a job. What jobs are best for the obstacles or tasks that are being presented, and it's more about can you use a tool to tackle that particular obstacle. I think also one of the benefits that folks kind of ignore when they think about how jobs are evolving and how skills are changing is that it also increases the base skills that every employee has access to. So that is tasks that you could ask ChatGPT to do, which you normally couldn't handle outside of your role, is that now everyone has a project manager as a resource, or everyone has a resource for brainstorming or coming up with drafts. So for example, if you want to run a Scrum session and you've never run one before, you could have ChatGPT pitch you the questions to help you crystallize your idea, and so it becomes this thought partner that you can use. The other last thing that I'll add is that within the past 2 decades, as the tech has been getting more advanced, we've been aging out older employees in our companies. And something that is exciting about ChatGPT and the use of large language models is that I forget who coined this term, but it's an edge for the aged, meaning as the skills that have become around, especially data analysis and generating data insights from unstructured or big data have been taking place, that involves us learning new programming and coding languages such as SQL and Python. Those are languages I personally am not interested in learning just yet, and I can't imagine what it would be like for somebody who's 1 or 2 generations older than me, to go back to take an online course and learn this programming language that you hadn't considered before. Well, now with ChatGPT, you can ask it, you could say, here's the program that I'm working in, here's the data set that I'm trying to access, what are the series of commands that I need to enter, and I can ask that in plain language, in conversational language, and it will understand what I'm asking for. Maybe with a few tweaks here and there, I might need to do that, but it's really giving back the ability for older folks who had are starting to get left behind by technology. It gives them that edge to be able to use conversation to figure out how to speak to these programs like SQL and Snowflake and things that frankly I felt used to be beyond my pay grade. Now I can run JavaScript queries and everything just by putting that into ChatGPT.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's like a third eye for us, I believe. When we wanted to understand something or have an idea about something, we usually let's try ChatGPT, and it may comes with a certain type of ideas and points and answers and so on. That's great. Bear with me, Kevin. The third point, what are the opportunities for AI, and specifically new generative AI tools in our careers?
Sure. So I think it helps me to think about when we're looking at opportunities for AI and specifically generative AI tools. I think it's helpful for me to think of these in terms of the short, maybe in the next 3 months, the medium in the next 6 months, and the long term in the next 3 years sort of view. So I think in the short term, one of the benefits that we have, and I think this is something that folks are already getting wise to, or already figuring out, which is how can I generate content faster, or how can I repackage and reformat existing information and make it more useful? So working in customer education, I create a lot of content for video content and maybe blog posts and different articles for content marketing, and also just general product education content, teaching new people who come to AI video how to use the tool, but also how to use it in the context that they're using it in. So my goal in the short term is to take all this content that I've created and squeeze every last bit of value of it. So I need to reformat this information for different audiences, or I need to have them interact with the content in a different way. So an example of this is previously I've been writing scripts for webinars that we put out geared towards L&D managers and how to evaluate tools in your company's tech stack. So now I can take some of those bigger topics that I covered in the webinar and turn them into interactive learning activities for in-person workshops. So if we're talking about something like this is how, this is the framework for evaluating tools, I can put those into a large language model similar to ChatGPT and have it generate an action mapping activity or some sort of brainstorming activity for a workshop. Or I can go from a podcast transcript and turn that into a blog post, or turn it into a webinar or workshop lesson. So in the short term, I'm really figuring out how to use the content that I have and turn it into different types of usable content for different types of audiences. In the medium term, this is more, I get excited about the area of performance support, or really how can I either create or access resources that help me to tackle a specific problem that I or another employee is having at work. So this is a big problem for companies when it comes to how companies train employees on the job. There's a lot of training that gets created by companies for employees that isn't necessarily relevant. And so, what that might look like is you get an email in your inbox that says, hey, now we have this new training that you need to set aside time for, or you need to take this course. But there's no, and that asks you to step away from your desk and kind of do something else. But there's no solution for the problems you're running into your day-to-day work. So a lot of people solve this by going straight to YouTube, or, going to some resource that's outside of the business. I think that's fantastic that people are able to problem solve, but it's not clear where the creators of those videos are getting their information, and it's not contextualized to a business. So one thing that we're starting to see now is how large language models, and Ross had mentioned this earlier, but are how they're getting tied to a company's knowledge. So what you do is you have your knowledge base and all your internal learning resources. You can now have that person make a request and say like, hey, this is the problem that I'm tackling, help me out. The large language model can not only pinpoint how that person prefers to consume that material, but also how it should package that for them. So maybe they generate some sort of text-to-speech audio podcast because that person is on the go, or maybe it's generating a one-pager or a job aid that's specific to the task the person is trying to struggle with. You're really taking, what it does is it takes the human need to take the time to create something for another human, which is difficult, and instead it's using generative AI to generate things on the fly, which is something I'm a huge fan of. And then the last and more the long-term view of what generative AI is useful for is something that a lot of folks, and I know Ross has done this recently with himself as well, is turning yourself into an AI avatar. And before we get too much into science fiction world, I think it's important to ask the framing questions. What do I use my avatar for? And what do I use my human self for? So currently what I use my digital clone of myself, it looks like me, it has my voice, but it can also speak in over 160 different languages. It can, I've used it more as a marketing tool. In the past 2 weeks, my avatar has appeared on the Danish national news, speaking in Danish, which I don't do. It's appeared in articles about training videos. I use it to greet international clients in a language that they're choosing. So meaning my avatar speaks perfect Arabic, and it covers what we're going to cover in our next in-person meeting. So it's kind of filling in the space in between what I use my human self for. It kind of speaks up for me or markets myself out. So I guess the big question is, why am I doing this? It's figuring out how my digital avatar can scale my presence many more times than just my human self can. And soon this technology is going to be available to everyone. So I think it's that long-term question: what would you use your digital self for? Especially if it doesn't get tired, it always stays patient, and it can be used to interact with real people.
I totally agree with you, Kevin. Thank you. Going to Ross, your point of view from L&D, and also I want you to tackle the opportunities under the TNA, which are the training needs analysis within that question.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first one, definitely build on Kevin said, I completely agree. I think what is really exciting is performance support. So I think there's an opportunity there for sure as we talk about more of the enterprise level applications coming in and getting access to company data. And like I say, we're going to see this, right? Because we have ChatGPT Enterprise now, we have Microsoft Copilot launching this autumn, winter as well. And the whole goal of those tools is going to be, how can we help you do the things the way we do at our company? So you may need to create a pitch deck for your senior leaders, and then a large language model trained on your company data can tell you specifically what are the things you need to include for our company versus the generic statements that you would get if you use a large language model without it being plugged into company data. And vice versa. I mean, some of the work I've been doing with organizations is using large language models as basic skill coaches. So by that, what I mean is, if we take an example of people having feedback conversations with individuals in their team, they're not too sure how to approach that. They can work with a large language model to give it context to say, look, this is the scenario that I'm going into right now. This is what I want to do based upon its training data. And the key thing here is that the training data is good data, because if it's rubbish, you're just going to get a rubbish output. But if it's good stuff from the organization and saying, this is how we have feedback conversations, this is what we suggest, here's a framework for you, and you're very much doing that in your workflow. And that's incredibly powerful, because it's meeting you where you are versus saying to you, come out of your workflow to go and engage with something else, which you're probably not going to do. So I think performance support is probably where it's going to go for me. I think it's going to be a very big tool in that space and to enable people. But again, it goes back to how organizations use this with their data, and then educating their workforce on how to use it the right way, because you're always going to get people who, if it doesn't give you the answer straight away, they are probably going to get quite frustrated, right? And to your second point around kind of training needs analysis, I mean, that's where it can get quite nerdy. And it really depends how much data you want to hand over to these large language models. So as an example, I've seen learning technology companies now who are experimenting with plugging in their different tools in the HR tech stack into a large language model to basically assess the skills of an organization and have access to all of the skill data, to then say to a L&D person who wants to figure out what are the main things we want to focus on for a year, the large language model can turn around and say, well, these are all the skills in the organization. This is the competency in the skills across all of our employees. Based on this data, we've identified that the three biggest lagging indicators is 1, 2, 3 skills. So we suggest that you focus on, building out or amplifying these 3 skills over the next year. And then vice versa, if it depends upon how much data you want to give it, it can then delve into particular team data on, what is this team struggling with? What are the blockers? How does that link to what the organization's doing and the organization performance? And then what it should be able to do, hopefully, is to then help you unearth those insights and say, okay, based on all of this data, I can analyze and basically say to you that I think you should do these 1 to 5 things over the next the next year, as your strategy. And then you can take that and validate that. And I think that that's going to be, I would say that's probably the next 2 to 5 years where that might go, where once we get more comfortable in how do we interact with it, we can then understand and say, how can we get deeper on the data analysis feature to actually help us look at, whether it's skills or it's tasks, whatever it is in organizations. And that's where a lot of my work focuses at the moment. is actually looking at how can we use it as more of a data analytics tool based upon what we get in there. So I think, look, there's definitely opportunity there, but I think we're a little bit off of that yet. I think we need to get past the, what is this thing? How does it work? How am I safe with this? And once we get kind of past those barriers, then we'll get into that space of how does it amplify the common things we do every year and give us data that's going to be very beneficial.
I totally agree with you, Ross, actually. And I believe also that to utilize these type of AI tools, we have to engage it with the performance appraisals in order to gather the information and where it comes once we reach the training needs analysis and shredding the skills or enriching the skills of the company staff and people. All right, thank you, Ross. Kevin, we'll start with you with this question. What are some of the key ethical and privacy challenges organizations may face when implementing AI technologies in people's job and roles? And how can these challenges be effectively addressed?
Sure. So there's definitely a bunch of these that are in there, but I think the one that stands out the most and that's currently being debated by governments and different organizations is this idea of data privacy. So, in this HR example, we're collecting all sorts of employee data and, feeding it to AI systems, which creates privacy risks if it's not properly secured and governed. So we need things like strict data governance, access controls, cybersecurity audits, and then also a big part of what we do at Synthesia is, especially when you're dealing with synthetic media and generated digital versions of people, is informed consent and how you gather that consent to have your image used, especially once you hook that up to something like an AI system where it's generating content with your face and voice on it. And so one of the key ways to tackle this is there are organizations and there are organizations that essentially have scorecards. So particularly when it comes to generative AI and Synthesia, one of the things to look at is that we're what's called SOC 2 compliant. And the nutshell of this is that it's a scorecard and a stamp that says, hey, this company is handling data responsibility. So without SOC 2 compliance, there's a lot of generative AI companies have this sort of credibility gap where even if they can create fantastic AI avatars, or they can create different types of generative AI media, if they're not protecting the user's data in a significant way, or they're not prioritizing data security, that's one of the biggest risks for generative AI companies right now, and not just for the company itself, but also for the users. And then also there's a lot that can be said around bias and fairness. So AI bias is always something that's really difficult to is something that we need to always be aware of, because AI algorithms are always they're based off of training data, and it's also based off the training data that's who's putting in that training data and then who's analyzing it. And so if we're looking at this in the field of HR, this could lead to a lot of discriminatory outcomes in terms of recruiting and performance reviews. And it's having the human oversight to understand what are these suggestions that AI, the AI systems are generating. And so one of the first concepts that I think really rang true with me is this idea of the human AI sandwich, where the human inputs the rules or makes the requests, the AI has the output, and then the human comes back on the other side. And I'm realizing this is a very Western American reference, where the land of hoagies and clubhouse sandwiches. But you have your human putting in the input, you have the AI output, and then you have the human that's coming in as another layer of sandwich in there. But it's really understanding that, one, these AI systems are inherently biased because of the information that we put in, and having the oversight of knowing experts and knowing how we address that bias and how we assess these outcomes. And part of it is just having experts review data sets and algorithms to identify potential bias before they go into AI systems, but also understanding having the expertise to understand what's coming out of them.
Thank you, Kevin. Ross, your point of view?
Yeah, I think Kevin answered it perfectly, to be fair. I haven't as much more to add on there in terms of really just doubling down on what Kevin said. And the real point, it always comes back to data. Data, we're pretty much leaking data left, right, and center on social media and other applications, and we're probably giving up a lot more data than we actually consider or even know about. So again, this comes back to data privacy, right? At the end of the day, the data that you give the company, how it treats your data, and the data that many of us are already handing over to some of these generative AI tools now. So just really kind of echoing what Kevin said is to just be conscious with your own data. What do you want to hand over to these tools? How much do you want to share and use in some of the things that you're doing? Because of course that data is all being stored somewhere, it's all being used somewhere. From a personal standpoint, of course, from a company standpoint, it's a little bit different, because it will be within hopefully the company domain and the company matrix. But I think the real challenge for all of this, as with any new technology, is data privacy. So what happens there, and just being more aware of that. And look, we're starting to see that play out already with some companies. Like, we're all on Zoom now, as an example, and Zoom is one of the companies more recently that's been flagged for changing its T's and C's to talk about using calls to be trained on with its generative AI tools to improve its products. So I think we're in that space where we haven't got all the answers, but we are, as a society, trying to figure out, how do we make this work and how do we make it work? So again, we're not just giving out more data, which at some point will probably turn into targeted ads and other stuff that we've experienced for the last 10 years with social media. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents on that.
Well, I would agree with you both, actually. And from thinking about it from a leadership point of view, that I would make that example similar to when we implement the ERP into the organization. So we create a separated servers in order to have the data and to isolate the data at the same time. I believe if we follow the same techniques, it's gonna save us the data privacy and so on. Going to question 5. Before I go to question 5, to the audience, if you may have any question, you may note it down until we reach the Q&A part. And Mariana, please take a note about that. So going back to question 5, what are organizations doing now to be successful in 2024 with generative AI tools? I would say Ross, to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. So look, I think the interesting thing right now is, I think we're all just trying to figure this out together, right? I don't think there's any blueprint right now. What is interesting, and we are seeing at a number of organizations, are these chief AI officer roles, which are now starting to appear in C-suite teams. Look, whether they're a gimmick right now, they're going to be a long-term, critical role, is yet to be seen. But I think what we can see is now that many, enterprise level and even scale ups and startup organizations are starting to really look at, how can we bring knowledge, structure, and governance to whatever we do in this space? And out of that, we're seeing people start to create, strategies in terms of, how can we be successful with generative AI tools over the next year? Because you don't want to be that company who's not doing it when 99% of the world are. So, chief AI officers are one thing. I think what we are seeing, and I mentioned earlier on about Walmart giving 50,000 employees a generative AI tool. Salesforce have already done this with hundreds of thousands of their employees with their Einstein GPT. HubSpot, the marketing platform, have done the same. So companies are experimenting, whether that is adding on a AI tool onto their current stack, or building stuff from the ground up, which I think we'll probably see more of. If any of you are in the HR and L&D space, there's a chap called Josh Burson who used to work with Deloitte, and he has the Burson organization, does a lot of research in this I can't remember all of it off the top of my head, but he basically broke down kind of AI tools into 3 different sections of stuff that's been added on right now. So we're seeing a lot of add-ons. We're then going to see stuff over the next year, as we are seeing announced, that are being baked in to existing tools. But then in the next year, we're going to see stuff that's truly built AI from the ground up. And that's going to be really interesting. So I think for organizations to be successful, it's kind of looking at what people are already doing, getting teams together to investigate what is the potential of this technology in our organization. And the answer maybe it isn't. It doesn't have to be that generative AI is a must-have. There's going to be some organizations and some fields of work where, it just doesn't, it's not needed. It's not going to be
Up to
beneficial.
the
So
need, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Going to the need. So I think, look at the people who are doing that, understanding what they're doing, talking to those organizations if you can, and just experimenting. I think the beauty of all this is test and learn. So, there's not going to be any great deal of harm from a very basic level, getting an understanding of these tools. I think my main recommendation is get an education in how this stuff works, and then make a decision on, is that going to help me, or is it going to hinder what I do already? So I think the people who are going to be successful with this in the next year are those people who are starting to do this already. So even if you don't use it, just understand what it is, get comfortable with that, and then so you feel more confident in your role and your organization. Even if you never touch ChatGPT, you never build a prompt, just having that general knowledge of, what is this thing, so you can understand, especially in the HR and L&D space that me and Kevin kind of sit over, how is that going to impact the future of work, the future of skills, the future of jobs, and just being aware of it can help you a great deal. But I'm sure Kevin's got some good points to add on that as well.
Thank you, Ross. I would totally agree with you, actually. Kevin, your point of view?
Sure. So I think you called that out, Ross. It's the idea right now is experimentation. I think we're seeing this happen from Synthesia's side. We're seeing this happen kind of at big companies. So think your Fortune 1000, your medium, and your small companies. So they're each experimenting in different ways, and a lot of it comes from being able to invest both the time and the money that it takes to actually have a pilot that will lead to somewhat of a business impact. So big companies, what they're doing is they're investing in large scale digital strategies. So these are your EYs, your PwCs, and the Deloittes of the world. They're a lot of them have initiatives to modernize their internal platforms and start training all their employees in AI tools and capabilities. So they're coming at it from a tools perspective, a digital strategy perspective, but also an education perspective, understanding how large language models work. And so they're actively working with different teams across the business. They're looking, like Ross was saying, at the skills of different roles and the tasks that are being asked, and looking immediately for the tasks that can be tackled with generative AI and large language models. And then when we get to the tools part of it, they're actively building products that employees can start using now and in 6 months and ongoing. So an example of this that I really like is Chat PwC. So at PwC, they do a lot in the financial services. They have a specialized AI assistant that they've launched for about 1,000 employees that focuses really around tax related queries and leveraging, their open AI integration. People are able to ask basic queries of PwC's internal knowledge base and get answers to their questions, or help them brainstorm different financial approaches into working with clients. And so right now it's 1,000 employees with expansion plans for both US and the global workforce. And they're investing over $1 billion for a 3-year roadmap that aims to upskill 65,000 employees and tailor that AI education to various business departments. So it's nothing new that they've been working with large language models and AI since 2017, but this is the first real product that seems like it's going to affect the company at large. And then you have medium-sized companies. Maybe they don't have the money to, $1 billion to throw out a 3-year roadmap for AI, but they're setting aside money and time for experimentation. So just last week, I was speaking with somebody who works at an IT services B2B financial platform, and they have around 500 or so employees. And what the company has done is they've said, hey, here are 20 tools that we've purchased for the next 4 months. We'd like to see 12 use cases with prototypes delivered in, I'm just going to make up a number, 3 months. And so obviously ChatGPT is one of those tools, but they're exploring everything from large language models to generative AI content production. And so they might not have an idea of where they are going, but they've said these are the tools we want to invest in, and we'll come up with use cases in this many months' time. And then if we look at the really small companies, and this is what I think more can affect some of the folks in this audience, you're not necessarily investing $1 billion in the next 3 years. Maybe you don't have a project roadmap. However, what you can do is you can build prompt libraries for all employees to use that are targeted towards making work more efficient. So what does this look like? There's a company called Tailspin, who I love, that does virtual reality learning for businesses. So if you think about it, maybe a course that they come up with is how to have a difficult conversation with an employee at work. What they do is they don't just say, hey, we're going to build a conversation and then turn it into VR. They go through they go through a design methodology where they do discovery, and then they do initial designs, and then they do a lot of iteration, and they have different releases and evaluations. What they've done is for each stage in this design cycle, they've said, let's say I'm doing discovery with somebody. I now have a series of prompts that I can put into ChatGPT to generate, let's say, an interview guide, or to make sure that my interview guide is targeted towards this level of management. Or maybe it's the design side where it says, hey, I need different activities to target this particular skill. I can generate, from a prompt library. I don't have to think about what I input into ChatGPT. I already have these prompt libraries that I can just copy and paste and make use of the tool right off the bat. So really, there's something, depending on the size of your company, or if you're an individual contributor, that you could be doing all the way from setting aside $1 billion if you have it, picking tools and deciding you'll have projects in 3 months, or on the small end, building a prompt library. This is where we've seen a lot of success with individual users to help them with the work that they're doing over and over and over again.
I would totally agree with you, Kevin. Thank you. So here we reach to our final part, which is the Q&A sessions. And please, if you have any question, please feel free to send your question. And Mariana, please read it out.
Does anybody have any questions from the audience? I see a few questions in the chat box, and Kevin and Ross have already answered them.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Mariana, I'd love to expound. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, it's Cameron. I just wanted to ask one question. If you didn't have any kind of AI presence in your tech stack, for example, if we look at L&D kind of area, I know ChatGPT is probably what pretty much anyone, regardless of where you are in the world, you would have heard of it. But if you were to introduce AI slowly and learn, as there's a lot out there, like every day you come across a brand new kind of tool that someone's created, and then they're sharing. So you get overwhelmed with so much that's coming at you. Where would you make a start and say, okay, let's take it nice and easy, and then we'll build it from there? I know ChatGPT, I've had my fair share of like kind of annoying him and trying to work out what's the how far can you go with the prompts, and I've had some great success with it, obviously personally, and people I spoke to as well. But in terms of someone who's probably even afraid of using technology completely, and you want to introduce AI into their world, where would you make a start?
I go first. So my recommendation would be to just start off with the basics. And what I mean by that so if we take generative AI as an example, because that's kind of the umbrella of all these tools, is you can literally spend 10 minutes to find out online, what does generative AI mean, what is involved in that, and get a pretty good understanding to make you feel more confident and comfortable in that term generative AI and how all of that works. I would next then think about, and we were saying this before as well, so sorry if I'm kind of repeating myself here, but then looking at, what you do day to day. So whether that's from a work perspective, whether that's from a personal perspective, and then do some research on other people in your fields, and then specifically how they're using a generative AI tool to give you some examples and give you some case studies. And they're starting to grow now. So then you can start to read more about that and understand, how does that work in that profession? How could that work for you on top of the education that you've now got for generative AI? And I think that the other part of that would be just to test and play as well, create a free account with, your tool of choice. And I think from a tool perspective, and I definitely understand this because I am on too many AI newsletters right now, and I get about 10 or 20 a day with about 2,000 new tools. So I'm in that same space as you. What I would definitely suggest is just focus on two tools. So one generic tool, which could be like a ChatGPT, which could be Claude from Anthropic, and that could be your general large language model tool. And then the second generative AI tool is something specific for your industry or the work that you're doing. Just pick two tools that work for you and then go all in on them and really focus on understanding how they work and bringing that into your workflow versus, trying to keep up with everyone on Twitter and LinkedIn who've got, 300 new tools a day and jumping from tool to tool. Just get really good at those two tools and spend about 3 months doing that. And then you'll start to get a better understanding of how do these tools work. And then, a lot of the tools follow the same blueprint, whether it's text to video, text to speech, they've all kind of got the same similar blueprint. So it would be education, finding those tasks that you do, use cases, and then experimentation. And that's basically what I did for 6 months last year. So from about July last year, when I heard about GPT-3 Playground, that's what I did myself because I was in the same position. I knew nothing about it. I was like, what is this thing? And so I just kind of followed that same process. So that would be my advice. But what about you, Kevin? What do you think?
Sure. So Cameron, I'm interpreting your question as, kind of how do we introduce using AI enabled tools to maybe a larger audience or to your organization, in addition to what Ross was saying about how to kind of combat overwhelm. So I think a lot of folks are looking, people who are first getting started with using AI enabled tools or generative AI, they're trying to think about how can I use this at my work, or how can I use this to do my job better, which I think is actually pretty difficult because like Ross said, it involves having to lay out the different tasks that you complete, across the next 30 days and do an inventory and figure out, what is, what areas could I use AI to make my life easier? I think it's important to, if you're just getting started, to take a step back and think about how you can use, let's say, ChatGPT in your personal life, because I think you need to have something that you're not worried about work, isn't business critical, and you need to make sure that you have some prior experience with it. So something like this is, let's say this might sound silly, but cooking and recipe ideas. It's what, you can start to understand the power of the tool if you say like, hey, these are the ingredients that I have. Here's how much time I have tomatoes, celery, and cheese in my fridge, in my refrigerator. I've got 30 minutes. What are examples of recipes I can make? And the reason I bring up this example is because you might already be familiar with a pasta sauce or something like that. But you'll start to see when you input that in and you start to format your queries, then you start to get outputs that you might start to recognize the value. So this is kind of silly, but a couple of weeks ago, my partner and I were getting married, and she and I are not event planners, and so we asked, ChatGPT to help plan our wedding. And so that gave us a rundown of the timeline of events that we should consider. It gave us a rundown of how we should curate and craft our guest list. And so it's being able to experiment with these tools in a way that you can start to recognize value and start then to apply it to your job. But it's also just a very low stakes, non-business critical way to start to introduce this into your organization, because it's one of these things where you must start experimenting with it or you'll get left behind. But you have to have a way that you can, you have to have an entry point. You have to have something that you also understand a little bit about.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Ross and Kevin. A really good answer. And yeah, I do like the way you taken it out of work and make it a bit more comfortable, where you're not worried about giving away your organization's data, and all you're doing is trying to figure out what can it do for me as a person.
Exactly.
And then when you're comfortable, then move on to workspace. No, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mariana, I'm not able to see the chat box. If there are, would you please check if there are any questions? And
Yes, I'll be keeping a tab on that. So if anybody would want to reach out to you guys, should I share your LinkedIn URL to the audience? Both Kevin and Ross's?
Yeah,
That works for me.
that works for me. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess because of in the interest of time, we will close the panel discussion. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, sounds great.
And if anybody has any questions, they can always email me, and I will be sending your LinkedIn profiles as well.
Cool. Good stuff. All right.
Wonderful.
Good to chat.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the panelists and also the moderator for this wonderful discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody in the audience as well enjoyed it. So thank you, everybody. Have a nice day. I'll be sharing a feedback form link in the chat box, so kindly share your feedback as well. The session is recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording of the session to all the participants who have registered. So stay tuned for more. We will be having more sessions like this for all of you. Thank you and have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.